In 2023, Red Bull pulled off one of the most dominant seasons ever, winning a mind-blowing 21 out of the 22 races in the season, beating the previous record set by McLaren and the legendary MP44 in 1988. Although there has been 35 years and numerous regulation changes since then, both these cars share one commonality. They were both powered by a turbocharged V6 made by the Japanese giant Honda. But rewind time back to 2017 and it seemed nearly guaranteed that Honda's latest Formula 1 entry would be remembered as a complete disaster. So how then did the laughingstock of F1 engine manufacturers become part of F1's most dominant campaign? This is how Honda became the kings of F1 again. Honda actually has a pretty long history with Formula 1, dating all the way back to the 1960s, when they entered the sport in 1964 with this, the RA271. They entered F1 doing something that only Ferrari and BRM were doing at the time, which was building both the chassis and the engine. Honda would be in the sport for a period of 5 years from 64 to 68, and during those early years, the Japanese manufacturer would only take home 2 victories and be a midfield runner for most of their time in the sport. But it would be Honda's second attempt with Formula 1 that would truly put Honda on the map. Honda would make its return to F1 in 1983, this time as an engine manufacturer that would power both Spirit and, more importantly, Williams. It would be here that Honda showed to the rest of the world that they not only had what it took to compete, but to beat the rest. And beat the rest they would, because just 3 years later, Williams would take home the Formula 1 Constructors' Championship, powered by Honda's 1.5-litre turbocharged V6. And this would just be the beginning. From 1987 to 1991, Honda would take home all the glory, as it would be Honda Power that would take back both the Constructors' and Drivers' Championships for those 5 years. At their peak, Honda engines were considered the ticket to glory due to their power, reliability, sophistication, and track record. And in 1988, in just their first year together, McLaren and Honda would go on to complete what was, until recently, Formula 1's most dominant season. Even with the switch from turbocharged to naturally aspirated, McLaren and Honda would still be a winning combination, and it would only be in Honda's final year in F1 that they would finally be dethroned by the spaceship that was the FW14B. Honda would withdraw all participation from F1 following 1992 due to the Japanese asset price bubble that occurred that year. Now fast forward to 2014 and Formula 1 enters the turbo hybrid era, and it's clear from the first race that Mercedes power is the one to have. However, for McLaren, who had been powered by the Germans since 1995, this would be the final year of the McLaren-Mercedes partnership, because in the middle of 2013, it was announced that Honda would be making a return to F1 by supplying McLaren from the 2015 season onwards, bringing back the iconic partnership from the past. For 2015, Honda would introduce their power unit, which was designed around McLaren's very tight chassis and aerodynamic requirements, which they had dubbed their Size Zero philosophy. This route would prove to be a fatal error for both parties. Over the 19 rounds of the 2015 season, the Honda power unit would prove to be a nightmare. So much so that McLaren driver Fernando Alonso dubbed it a GP2 engine at the Japanese Grand Prix. It was underpowered and extremely unreliable, with the McLaren recording 12 DNFs over the course of the 19-race season. They would finish the season in 9th, just ahead of Mauritius. 2016 would be a much better season for the Japanese manufacturer, with McLaren scoring more than double the previous points tally from 2015. Although when it came to the reliability front, the Honda was still lacking compared to the others, but nevertheless, they had made a jump forward from their dismal 2015 showing. For the 2017 season, Honda redesigned the entire power unit. The new design would borrow from Mercedes and their innovative split turbo, which they had pioneered and used to give them a major head start in the turbo hybrid era. Honda confessed that the new design was high risk and it would take time to reach its potential, but will ultimately give higher performance. However, when it came to the actual season, the team had taken a step back to 2015 levels of unreliability and would end up with 15 retirements over the season. By this point in the partnership, the relationships between both parties had soured to the point that McLaren did not want to continue with the Honda power unit anymore. And so, in September 2017, at the Singapore Grand Prix, the two announced that they would split at the end of the season, bringing an end to 3 years of a disastrous partnership. This decision would completely change the future of Honda's Formula 1 project. In September 2017, it was also announced that Honda would be the works engine partner for Toro Rosso for the 2018 season in an engine swap deal with McLaren. Honda's 2018 power unit, the RA618H, was a more mature variant of the architecture introduced in 2017. The power unit proved to be significantly more reliable compared to the previous year, with only 3 engine-related retirements throughout the season. And in just their second race with Honda power, Toro Rosso would finish in 4th, making it Honda's best result since their return. Honda would continue to make massive strides forward during the season, with every new engine specification garnering more performance than the previous. Although they would finish 9th in the championship, much of this was down to bad luck and Honda and Toro Rosso actively sacrificing the season to start 2019 off better. But why would they do this? They did this because in the middle of 2018, Toro Rosso's sister team, Red Bull, decided to make the switch from their longtime supplier Renault to the Honda for the 2019 season and beyond. This came at a time when Red Bull themselves were starting to feel extremely held back by the Renault power unit, which was both unreliable and underpowered. To put it into perspective, Red Bull would end 2018 with more DNFs than their sister team. Honda and Red Bull aimed to work closely together to allow for perfect synergy between chassis and power unit, which would provide a significant packaging advantage. 2019 was targeted as a building year for World Championship contention in future seasons. Straight away, however, the signs that they could be competitive were there. At the season-opening Australian Grand Prix, Red Bull Honda driver Max Verstappen took 3rd place, Honda's first podium since returning to Formula 1. And it would only take Honda until round 9 for them to see the top step again. Red Bull would take home the victory, with the Red Bull Honda package proving to be the fastest on race day at the 2019 Austrian Grand Prix. Another victory would follow 2 races later in Germany, and at the following race in Hungary, the Red Bull would be fastest in qualifying. Another victory would come later that season at the Brazilian Grand Prix, where it would be a Honda 1-2, as a Red Bull and Toro Rosso would finish 1st and 2nd. But it was also just more than a victory for Honda, because on the final lap, the Honda-powered Toro Rosso had managed to outdrag the Mercedes and hold on to P2, proof that Honda could now go toe-to-toe with the others. During the 2020 season, the Red Bull Honda package proved to be the second fastest, with deficits on both chassis and power unit, leaving them behind Mercedes and the all-conquering W11. At the 8th round during the Italian Grand Prix, AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly achieved his first Formula 1 victory. This made Honda the first engine manufacturer to win with multiple different teams in the V6 turbo hybrid era. However, in October 2020, Honda announced that they would withdraw from Formula 1 at the end of the 2021 season, citing their need to focus on resources on next-generation road vehicle technologies to make necessary strides towards carbon neutrality. Nevertheless, Red Bull and Honda ended 2020 on a high by scoring pole position and then winning the final race of the season in Abu Dhabi. Although Honda would be leaving at the end of 21, Honda was still committed to winning the championship during that year, and as a result, it brought forward an all-new power unit design that was previously planned for 2022. The RA621H, Honda's 2021 power unit, was significantly better performing, more reliable, and more compact than the previous iteration, with some thinking that Honda had surpassed Mercedes as a whole. As we all know, 2021 would be a fiercely fought affair that would go up to the last round, with eventual champion Max Verstappen being the first non-Mercedes powered champion in the turbo hybrid era. Even though Honda had withdrawn from the sport, they would still be powering Red Bull and their sister team in the form of the newly formed Red Bull Powertrains, Red Bull's very own engine team, which would still be using Honda power units until the next engine regulation. The 2022 season would further stamp Red Bull and Honda as a partnership duo, with the RB18 powered by the RBPT or Red Bull Powertrains 1, a rebadged Honda power unit, pretty much dominating most of the season. 2023 of course would see an even more dominant season. In fact, it would be the most dominant season F1 has ever seen by both driver and team. The RB19 would win all but one race and would finish every single race in the hands of Max Verstappen, a far cry from their early years in the turbo hybrid era.